Yo guys, Punkrat with another video. Here we go again with another leveling guide. This time we're going to cover the sinister scoundrel of the shadows, the Rogue. Rogues are acceptable but not exceptional when it comes to leveling in Classic WoW. They aren't the best. In general, melee classes aren't really that great. It can be tough due to having to face tank most of the mobs, but rogues have more utility built into their toolkit, which allows them to climb up that leveling power tier quite a bit. So rogues are much better than warriors, that's for sure. Now let's go over exactly what you need to do to make your life easy while leveling a rogue in Classic WoW. Let's get into it. Really quick, let's go over the race choice for rogues in Classics. On Alliance side, the best race for PvE is Human, with mace and sword specialization. For PvP, it's Gnome with Escape Artist, and second tier I'd say is Dwarf with Stone Form. Night Elves are pretty dog tier. On Horde side, the best PvE rogue is Orc with Blood Fury, and I'd say second tier would probably be Trolls with Berserking and Beast Slaying. For PvP, it's definitely Undead, and Orcs are still quite good with Blood Fury and Stun Resistance. Orcs are, I'd say, really good as Dagger Rogues, since Blood Fury giving you big ambush crits is pretty nice. Now let's cover the best talent builds for leveling up. You're going to want to go Combat Swords for the most optimal leveling pace. I won't be covering daggers at all in this video because front stabbing won't actually work in Classic WoW. Front stabbing, if you aren't aware, is something that used to work on the older 1.12 client and private servers, which would allow you to clip into your enemy's 3D model and cast backstabs without necessarily being behind the target visually. But in general, dagger spec is just not as good as swords, and this is due to a couple reasons. Good swords are much easier to come by in the leveling process since you get a bunch of good ones from quests pretty much the whole way through. There's very few good daggers that you could get from quest rewards in general. Most of them drop from dungeons. But even with that said, Combat Swords is just the better spec, and it's definitely the one that you want to be running while leveling up. So there's 4 talents in the combat tree that make Combat Swords the best spec by far. So we've got Riposte, Combat Sword Specialization, Blade Flurry, and Adrenaline Rush. Now Riposte is probably the most important talent that you can get while leveling up. It's an attack that can only be used after parrying an enemy strike, so it's like a counter attack in a certain sense after you parry. It becomes active and you can strike for 150% weapon damage while disarming the target for 6 seconds in the same spell. So that's why it's so important. It's a strike which also disarms your enemy. It's insane value while leveling up in one ability. You're constantly fighting mobs head on 1v1, so disarming them will allow you to reduce incoming damage significantly, which also in turn allows you to sustain for longer periods of time while mob grinding in an aggregate sense. Now Combat Sword Specialization is simple. It's just extra attacks that proc on top of your strikes and auto attacks, especially once you start prioritizing Slice and Dice, which increases your attack speed and allows you to proc more hits or more extra hits more often. Blade Flurry and Adrenaline Rush are offensive pop cooldowns, so Adrenaline Rush is a 5-minute cooldown that lets you go full Rambo mode, giving you insane energy regen so you can just pump out way more strikes than usual and generate more combo points at a faster pace as well, of course. And Blade Flurry, which will double your strike damage onto a second target, allowing you to kill 2 mobs at once. These 2 abilities used in conjunction is incredibly strong. But there's also one more talent which you might overlook, and this talent is important to fill out 3 out of 3 regardless of what spec that you plan on playing in your leveling process. It's called Improve Gouge, which adds a 1.5 second to the CC duration of your Gouge ability. I'll explain why this is important in a later portion of the video. So here's the talent order that you want to follow while leveling up. I'll just slow the video down if you guys want to see it at a slower pace. Now once you hit level 30, you can also opt for a different spec if you enjoy this one more. So if you guys want improved stealth, sap, and other abilities to increase your sneakiness level for solo adventures, or just if you PvP a lot and you really want to have preparation or some of those talents, this spec is great in PvP. It's called Hemorrhage spec, and the reason why Hemo is quite strong in both PvE and in PvP while leveling up is that Hemorrhage itself only costs 35 energy to cast, so in general you'll be working with more combo points, which allows you to stack longer stuns in PvP or just get more combo points in general while you're fighting mobs out in the world. You also get initiative, which gives you an extra 75% chance on your opener out of stealth to get an extra combo point, so with Garrote, Cheap Shot, and all those abilities. You get improved stealth, improved sap, which allows you to sneak around much better and control your environment, and you don't necessarily need to go deep into subtlety at all either, so you can just get Hemo and preparation in the subtlety tree, then push for more important talents in other trees like improved gouge and early assassination talents like malice, lethality, relentless strikes, and ruthlessness. I really prefer running this spec past level 30 on a PvP server specifically because I care more about my actual experience playing the game than leveling at a marginally faster pace, so that's my take on the situation. Now let's talk about the rotation. In the early levels, you pretty much just cast Sinister Strike and Eviscerate at 4 to 5 combo points, rinse and repeat and nothing beyond that. But once you get a bit higher level, around level 20, and you've put enough talents in your combat tree to get Riposte, you cast Riposte as your top priority once you proc it off a parry. That's pretty much all that changes then. But once you get level 42, you get access to rank 2 Slice and Dice, and using this notorious haste buff starts to become more of a priority. So at level 42, you start to use Slice and Dice, but keep in mind that you don't want to be using many combo points on it, considering that the fights that you're going to be engaging in won't necessarily last super long. So depending on the armor values of your enemy, you should have an idea of how long the fight against that mob is going to take. So generally, you might only need to use 2 or 3 combo points on your Slice and Dice, then focus the rest on Eviscerate. So don't waste too many combo points on using Eviscerate. And also, like I just stated, only use Slice and Dice once you get rank 2 at level 42. When it comes to Expose Armor and Rupture, you generally only want to be using these abilities against mobs that have high armor values and big health pools. So soloing elite mobs, for example, or harder quest mini bosses, these combo point dumping abilities are only worth it if you can get the full effect. Otherwise, just default to Eviscerate at all times. So that's the base. Now let's talk about some more intricate little things that you could be doing to make your life easier in combination with your base rotation. The first thing is your cooldowns. Use your cooldowns on cooldown. You have access to all of your major pops every 2 to 5 minutes depending on which one that we're talking about. You want to be using them pretty much every single time that they're up. Every time Blade Flurry Adrenaline Rush is up, pull 3 mobs and cleave them all down. Then pull 2 mobs 2 minutes later when your Blade Flurry is up and cleave them down without Adrenaline Rush. And then Blade Flurry Adrenaline Rush again once they're both back up again. And just keep going every single time it's up. Don't sit on your cooldowns. So every 3 or 5 minutes you can also be casting Evasion, or use it in combination with the previous combo that I just spoke about to tackle daunting challenges. The reason I said every 3 or 5 minutes is because you could actually spend points to reduce the cooldown of your evasion and your sprint by 1.5 minutes if you want to skip some points in like maybe Vile Poison later on in Assassination or something and just put 2 extra points into your combat tree. Another trick that you can use is Gouge, and this is why you want to be prioritizing improved Gouge regardless of the spec that you run, which is what I alluded to earlier. Gouge has a baseline 4-second CC duration, but with improved Gouge, it goes up to 5.5 seconds, which is pretty significant, and it also generates a combo point. So you can use Gouge, then wait there for your energy bar to tick back up, then engage the mob again, which will allow you to work with more combo points. You can also Gouge, then use bandages to heal yourself up mid-combat, which is one of the most important tricks for a rogue while leveling up and in PvP. And once you get blind, you can do the same, blind the enemy and then bandage up. But keep in mind, to cast blind, you actually have to have blinding powder, which is made from Fade Leaf, so you need to stock up on Fade Leaf if you expect to use blind actively. And this brings up the point that it's a huge priority while you're leveling up to keep up with your first aid and to get it immediately. So first aid on a rogue has to be a massive priority for you. Another little tip that I could give you is don't waste combo points. So if you have 2 combo points on a mob that's about to die, and it would be a waste to eviscerate that mob and just do overkill damage, make sure to grab that 2-point Slice and Dice to salvage those combo points before heading to the next mob. And a last little tidbit, I guess it's part of your rotation, so I'll just add it in, is use Pickpocket. So while you're running around in stealth, you might be about to open on a humanoid mob ahead of you, you might as well pickpocket it. It's kind of part of your rotation, you guys get it. When it comes to what you should do while trying to open on a mob from stealth, generally just cheap shot. I mean, if the mob has a higher armor value, you could opt for a Garrote, but I tend to just like to cheap shot pretty much every single time because you save yourself from being hit a significant amount of times while the mob is stunned, allowing you to keep healthy a lot better while mob grinding. You could also switch to a dagger with a macro and then ambush out of stealth, then switch back to your sword and cast Sinister Strike or Hemo depending on what spec you are, This is semi-viable. I would honestly only do this against low armor mobs, so humanoid caster mobs, birds, creatures that get hit really hard by physical strikes with low armor values. But I'd say ambush is probably more reliable if you go the route that I was talking about earlier at level 30, where you spec into subtlety in Hemo spec, just because your stealth is going to be stronger, it's going to be much more reliable, and therefore you'll be able to, get the ambushes off in a better manner. And last little tip that's not really related to your attack rotation, but let's add it here anyhow, is using an add-on like Outfitter, where you can have a second set of gear with straight spirit on it. So picking up spirit items every time that you can as you're leveling up, whenever you're fighting a mob and you're going to that next mob or running to the next mob after you've killed the first one, you could swap to your spirit set as you're running over and health regen back up a little bit, then swap to your gear back before you engage the mob, if it's a relatively long run, of course. Or while eating between each mob and trying to get healthy, you could put spirit gear on to expedite your healing process and increase your health regen. Okay, now let's talk poisons. Not really too much to cover here. You want to be stacking double instant poison on both of your weapons. Deadly poison does a good amount of damage too, but it's not worth using since you need to stack it up 5 times. The dot actually stacks up 5 times on the enemy to get the full effect, and mobs will die before you can accomplish that for the most part. So it's just not really worth using. Instant poison is just a nature damage proc on hit, so it's much more reliable. It does the full damage every time it procs. And the deadly poison dot will break your blinds and your gouges, so again, it's just really not worth using. You can use mind-numbing poison, however, on your offhand if you're grinding cloth-wearing caster mobs that are actually casting fireballs or frostbolts on you, which will increase their cast time. That's actually pretty good since you're going to be taking less damage. It can be okay, but it's super situational. Generally, you want to be using double instant poison. Also, in relation to poisons, you always want to have a slow weapon in your main hand for the increased weapon damage on your strikes from 2.4 to 2.8 second attack speed, but in your offhand, the fastest weapon that you can get is the best weapon. So your offhand is all about proccing poisons. You want a super fast offhand that can get as many instant poison procs as possible, so a slow main hand and a really quick offhand. If you see a dagger that's 1.4 speed, sometimes it's better to use that dagger than it is to use the sword for the sword specialization if it's too slow. Now, as you guys know, the most important factor to your damage as a melee is your weapon, your main hand weapon. So let's go over some sword progression while leveling up. The first decent swords that you can get on the Alliance side are Daryl's short sword, which is from the quest A Hunter's Challenge in Loch Modan, or Solid Short Blade from Red Silk Bandanas in Westfall, and you guys all know that quest, right? It's one of the earlier quests for the Defias quest chain. Horde has Elegant Short Sword, which is from the quest Serena Bloodfeather in the Barrens. In your 20s, there's Cruel Barb from Dead Mines, or Horde side has a more reliably attainable blade in Wingblade from the quest Leaders of the Fang in Wailing Caverns. In your 30s, Scarlet Monastery has a sword that you get from a quest reward. The Alliance one is Sword of Serenity from the quest In the Name of Light. There's also a Horde version called Sword of Omen from the quest Into the Scarlet Monastery. Also in that same level range, we have Vanquisher's Sword, which is from Razorven Downs, which is available on both factions from the quest Bring the Light. In your mid-level 40s, we can go to Maradon and pick up Thrashblade from the quest Corruption of Earth and Seed. And honestly, you could just use this blade all the way up to level 60. It's really, really good. 2.7 attack speed with a chance to proc an extra attack mixed in with your combat sword specialization. So really, really nice sword. I would just stick with this till level 60. Alright fellas, that's the rogue leveling guide. If you're sad that I skipped over the dagger rogue, I'm sorry, but I mean it just would have made the video much more convoluted, and honestly it's just not really worth the trouble unless you want to make daggers your identity as a rogue. But even then, dagger rogues blow up more at level 60 when you get high levels of critical strike and attack power, so start off with swords with the easy weapon progression and have an identity shift, I guess, at level 60 and go daggers. It's just a better way to go about it in my mind. I hope you learned something useful from this one. I know a lot of you guys are going to be playing rogue, I mean that's just for sure, so this guide should give you a good understanding of what you need to do to level up effectively. And if you guys have any useful information, make sure to leave it in the comment section, fellas. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, of course, you know the drill. Follow me on Twitch so we can chill on the release of Classic WoW. Join the Discord for epic banter, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace.